So I'm going to talk to you a bit in this video about how to respond to your spouse's sex addiction. What can you do? What can you do that's healthy? What's not healthy? To just kind of give you some options and some ideas. So once you find out that your spouse, most likely your husband, is involved with a struggle with sex addiction, what can you do? Well, the first thing that you'll experience after the shock and the denial and all the whole self-esteem issues, I went into all of that in a previous video, is you'll find yourself obsessed with it. So I recommend that in the beginning, when you're trying to figure out, that you do search for the truth. You look at charge card statements, you check the history on the computer, you find out on your own and from asking your spouse what is going on. Are you going to nightclubs? Are you going to massage parlors? Is there prostitution? Is there other women that you're meeting on the internet, or is it just pornography? You need to know. You need to know what you're dealing with. But once you find out, you don't allow that obsession to continue to drive you to check and check and check, because that will lead to craziness in your own life and your inability to manage your life. So you are going to need help, most likely for you. There's groups that you can go to. Codependence of Sex Addicts is COSA. There's Christian groups. Celebrate Recovery at churches have groups for women, that some of them for wives of sex addicts if they're big enough, or just codependents. And there's also groups for sex addicts, the men, to work in a group with other sex addicts. So that's a great place to go. And then there's other programs, there's therapy, there's all kinds of stuff that will give you that support. I've got some other things on my website, and my book, 10 Life-Saving Principles for Women in Difficult Marriages, will also really help you. And I've also got some audio and video studies. So basically, you've got to make a decision, and this is a hard one. How much is okay? How much is not okay? Is zero tolerance, no pornography? Are you going to require that a password be put on the computer, parent controls, the computer put in a place in the house where you can see it? But with everybody having smartphones today, this is really tough. So is it a zero tolerance? Is your husband going to go get help? Is he willing to be involved in therapy? It takes a lot of therapy to work on sex addiction. It is a real addiction. It changes your brain just like an addiction does. It needs therapy, needs a 12-step program, an accountability partner, all of that. You can heal your marriage, and sex addicts can get help if you do it the right way. So, you've got to kind of reach out, get some help to get you strong, and then decide what's okay and not okay in your marriage. Most people will, and most therapists will, ask the sex addict to divulge everything that happened in the history of the sex addiction. And this is real difficult, but if the sex addict doesn't do it, then you're always wondering, what happened that I didn't know? How am I going to find it out? And you never come to that place of peace. And since most sexual addiction is done in private and it's a secret, the sex addict, to get healthy, has to make everything come out in the open in order to not feel like he's continuing to hide things, because that only perpetuates the addiction cycle even more. So you have to make a decision on your own sexual relationship with your spouse. What are you willing to do and not willing to do? And that's okay. You have a right to set that boundary. You don't ever have to do anything in the bedroom that you're not comfortable with. You can also have a time period where you say, until the sex addiction is under control and things are disclosed and all this stuff is there, you might not feel safe and comfortable with having sex, and you certainly should not if there is the risk of any type of transmission of sexually transmitted diseases, because your spouse has actually been unfaithful. So also, you can take a time apart if you need that in terms of separation. That's up to you. Some people do that. Some people separate bedrooms in the house. Some continue to sleep together but not have sex. Some people actually have a physical separation for a time. All of that you kind of have to work out. They all have different levels of good and bad. So part of it, the other thing that you have to come to terms with is, and this is true for any addiction, is that you're powerless. You cannot make a sex addict stop engaging in the sexual addiction. You have no ability to do that. The sex addict has to get help for himself. So you cannot make him, and you cannot allow yourself to become, your own life to become unmanageable because you're trying to make him get sober. So when you admit that, that allows you to turn the focus back on yourself and say, I can't force this to happen, so I'm going to get help for me. The next one is, like I said, boundaries. You get to decide, and it may take a while for you to come to that point, but you get to decide what's okay for you and not okay for you. And forgiveness. Forgiveness takes time. It is not something you can do right away. It is not something that you can offer at the beginning when you find out about the sexual addiction. I had one woman that came to my classes years and years ago, had been married for 36 years, and she had just found out her husband had been engaging in pornography and occasional prostitutes for that entire time. And she was willing to work it through, and they did, and it has been awesome. And it's been years. However, at that time, they immediately went into counseling, and the counselor said to her, you need to forgive. When are you going to forgive? And I said, oh my gosh, no way. You don't even know what happened. This is 35 years. You don't even know what you're forgiving. You're still in shock. It takes time to get to the point where you forgive things. So she could not forgive that until she knew what actually happened that she was forgiving, and go through that process of the shock and the grief of all the loss that she had to do, of all the years where she thought this was her marriage when in reality it was something else. So forgiveness is important, but it takes time, not something that you can do right away. So, as far as letting your husband know what you need and honestly what you're struggling with and how this has affected you is hard, especially if he's, wants to get help, and that's very painful for him to hear, but you've got to have that honesty in the relationship and that openness if you want to heal together. And as I said, sexual addiction, he's got to dig deep and figure out what the wounds are that he has, that he uses the sex addiction to fulfill and to cover up and be able to deal with his emotions in a different way, and then to figure out, how to become accountable to make sure that the acting out does not happen again. So it's a process, and there definitely is there are options, and there is hope for you and hope for your husband or your wife if it's that unusual time where it is a woman who's dealing with that. So I would just recommend that you find more help, whether it be a program, as I said, or resources, books, things like that. Check out my website. There's other sexual addiction websites, and I list some that I recommend. So anyway, thank you so much for watching this video on Change My Relationship. And please write me if you have questions. Thank you. God bless.